But when you start to realize that the true purpose of life is figuring out who you are, why you are, what your purpose is, true self-awareness, discovering what makes you unique, and then going outside and expanding and expressing that, that's the essential concept of the journey to your ultimate self. We're going to discuss questions that I have no idea what they are, but it should be pretty entertaining for you and pretty thought-provoking as well. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very exciting. And the rabbi was honest about that. He has no clue what the questions are, but I told him it's not going to be anything too high risk for you to address, but definitely going to bring out a lot of good information. So without further ado, welcome to the JQA Podcast. This is episode 4. I'm sitting with R Shmuel Reichman, who just put out a phenomenal book. So usually I try to identify a certain theme for every topic, every episode that we do. And when I saw this book come into the mail, I saw this was just an unbelievable topic just to bring out. And I think that the topic we can call the title of the book, which is The Journey to Your Ultimate Self. And the theme of it was really to find our inner purpose, find our true meaning in life. So without further ado, let's get into it. I want to start off by asking you the first question, which is the most obvious, is why the journey to your ultimate self? Like, why that terminology? What's with the journey and what's with to the ultimate self? What are we trying to find here?
So that's a great question. And I'm not going to go into my story, but the essential concept comes from the recognition of a couple key principles. Number one, everyone in this world is here on a journey. And the journey is based essentially, in terms of this sefer, this book, on a Gemara which I mention all the time, and many of you who have heard me speak before will recognize this Gemara. Gemara is in Daf Nida Daf Lamed Amud Beis. And the Gemara Nida Daf Lamed Amud Beis talks about a very strange phenomenon, that when we were in the womb, we learned Kol HaTorah Kula. And just before we were born, the Malach who taught us all this Torah made us forget it. And the basic question is, why are we born into this world without knowing all that Torah? And if you're going to make us forget the Torah, why teach it to us in the first place? So the Vilna Gaon explains in the most profound way that the reason why you learned all of this Torah is because you weren't just being shown practical Torah Shebeksav, Torah Sheba'al Peh, you were being shown the purpose of the entire world, but more importantly, you were being shown your unique purpose. And then you lost that because your job is to come into this world and achieve it and build it, earn it, choose it. And each of us are in this world to become our ultimate selves, essentially, not to become great, but to become you. And the journey to your ultimate self is not the journey to greatness, but it's truly a unique, personal, subjective journey where you're supposed to figure out who you are, why you are, what makes you unique, what are your talents, how do you work, how do you think, how do you learn, because no one thinks the same way, no one learns the same way, we're all unique, we're all different. The Ramchal says that Kadosh Baruch Hu gave every person their unique talents, their unique family, DNA, their experiences, every aspect of your entire makeup is unique to you, and as opposed to looking around and comparing yourself to other people, you're supposed to look within and discover who you are, what you are. It's like, most people are affected by their environment, but it's one of those things where, like a thermometer, you put it kind of like measures the environment and it reflects the environment. But a thermostat, you set the thermostat and it expands and impacts the environment. And most people, they just become a reflection of their society, a reflection of their friends. But when you start to realize that the true purpose of life is figuring out who you are, why you are, what your purpose is, true self-awareness, discovering what makes you unique, and then going outside and expanding and expressing that, that's the essential concept of the journey to your ultimate self, which is, number one, recognizing there is a journey. Number two, recognizing that there is an ultimate self. And number three, recognizing that that's what life is about, taking that journey. And just a little bit of a side point, which I don't usually share, is that the journey to your ultimate self is a capital S there. So most people think it's to your ultimate self, to you, to the best version of you. It's a self-help book. But first of all, this is a machshava sefer. It's designed to give you the most fundamental, deep, underlying principles of Torah thought. But number two is that self has many levels and layers. Because there's your individual self, and then when you become your best self, you then expand into a greater self in marriage. You become part of a shared self, and then you expand that sense of self into a greater self, a family, and then you expand into a greater self, a community, a greater self, Klal Yisrael, a greater self, Adam HaRishon's neshama, which includes all of humanity, and then the self of all self, the neshama shal neshama, as Nefesh Chaim explains, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the true journey of life is becoming your ultimate self, but discovering that self within a greater context, a greater self, which is the levels and layers of existence. And when you're striving on that journey, becoming your ultimate self, like people are searching for happiness, that's the underlying component of happiness. When you are becoming your greatest self, there's this state of happiness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you, which is the recognition that you're living a life of truth and becoming your greatest self.
Wow, okay, so that was an action-packed answer, and there's so much to unpack over there that to get into whatever you just answered, it will take us more than the duration we have for
That's what the Sefer is about, so we'll leave that for later.
Approximately yay big. There's enough information to go around for the whole year. And the beauty of it is that it's broken down by parshias. So we have all 52 parshias, or 52?
A little more than that, but we'll
let's say 54? 54.
Yeah.
They correct me, because I don't want to look at it.
But it's okay. However many parshias there are. And the purpose of that, by the way, is that, and we've all experienced this, like I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, where you learn a deep sefer, and part of an actual real live interview, and you know that this isn't just fixed, is that there's real interruptions. This part will be cut, by the way.
No, we're keeping it in.
We're keeping it in.
Natural as possible.
By the way, I one time made a motivational video. I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm a deep speaker, but motivation is a key to engaging with depth, is making it inspiring and deep and motivating, synthesizing all of this together. I gave it, and like right at the end, if anyone who's ever made a video, you know that it takes time to become good at making videos, because you have to really, really get good, especially when you make videos where there's no one else there, there's no audience. You have to like simulate a real engaging experience, and it's acting at a certain point. And it takes time to create a perfect video. And it was a 5-minute video, 4 minutes and 43 seconds in, I made a mistake. And I was like, you know what, like, I'm going to I said this in the video, like, you know what, like, most people would cut it and either restart it, cut this part. I'm going to keep this in, because life is about accepting the fact that there are bumps along the road. You learn from them, you become better because of them. You don't ignore them, you don't try to just, say, I'm going to become, despite my challenges, I'm going to become great. You become great because of your challenges. So, that just built the momentum, and we're going to continue. So just to continue our point, the reason it's broken according to the Parsha is because so often we learn the deepest books, deepest Sfarim here, deep sheer, and it's one of those things where you want to engage in depth, you want to build a systematic way of understanding and engaging in Torah, but it's overwhelming, it's daunting, and you say, like, how am I going to finish the Sefer? It's too much. So you start it, and then you stop, and you start again, and you stop. So the reason it's broken up according to the Parsha is to give you a fundamentally broken up, organized way where it's already aligned with the weekly Torah cycle, with the yearly Torah cycle, so that you can say, I'm just going to do one chapter a week. And it's, Baruch Hashem, people told me they love the Parsha aspect, because it's not really a Parsha Sefer. Obviously it's connected to the Parsha, but Parsha Svarim, there's only so much depth you can go when you're dealing specifically with the Parsha. But when you use the Parsha as a framework and as a gateway, you can talk about any aspect of Torah thought framed within the Parsha.
And so you actually, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Of course.
I had to check on the first Parsha, because it happens to be my Bar Mitzvah Parsha, Bereshis. So I had to just check what you wrote on it, and happens to be it was the example that you just brought up earlier with the baby in the womb.
Exactly.
How he's being trained of all of Torah, and specifically with his purpose of life. So I found that to be a very beautiful lesson to take away from Bereshit. I mean, with Bereshit, it's an endless Parsha. So just to pick anything you could have picked from that, and you picked this one, I think that was a phenomenal. You don't need my approval of that, but definitely it was.
So the next print, I'll get your Haskama as well.
The Haskamas that are on here, by the way, are literally beyond anything.
Some of the names, cover.
Some back cover.
Most of them.
Some of the names that I saw here, in particular, Rabbi Akiva Tatz, Rabbi Jonathan Rieti, Rabbi Yitzchak Berkowitz on here too.
Rabbi Yitzchak Berkowitz is not, but he's phenomenal.
Yeah, but
Rabbi Asher Weiss, Rabbi Rosenzweiger,
I definitely felt a lot of the same type of inspiration from them peeled in this book. I can tell why they put their Haskamas on it, why they put their name on it, because definitely put their word on it. I wanted to move on. Just you did frame the book as a framework of the Torah set in all the parshios. So I just wanted to ask, many people view the Torah as, unfortunately, as a history book or as a book of laws. So what I would ask you to describe is, what would you say we can use the Torah for in terms of personal growth, and how would you address that?
That's a great question. So it's actually, I use that exact line in one of the chapters where, academics, I've been, in addition to getting smicha and spending a lot of time in yeshiva and beis medrash and giving shiurim in that environment, I've studied in the non-Jewish academic world at Harvard, University of Chicago, and it's not just academics, but academics as well. They often view Torah as a history book, a book of law, a book of, it's a limited form of what Torah is. And Torah is everything. Torah is more than everything, but it's also everything. Estakel b'raisa bar alma, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked into the Torah and used it to create the world, which means that Torah is the root and source of everything in the universe. It's like a seed expresses into a tree, a zygote is manifest into a human being. You look at a projector and what you see that comes from the projector on the screen, it stems from the projector. The root is always more potent and powerful than the expression and source. As the Ramchal says, you always want klalim in life, not pratim. You want the underlying principles, not the expressed facts, because from the klalim, you can understand all the expressions. When you understand the root, you understand the expression. Now, you could go both ways, by the way. As in, Avraham looked at the physical world, was able to trace it back to the spiritual, understand that Hashem exists. As in, he went from the expression back to the root. And Shlomo HaMelech was given the gift of Chachmas HaTorah, and he went from that, understand all the expressions in the physical world. He was given the gift of understanding Torah and was able to learn the wisdom of the entire physical world, because you could go both ways. But when you are given the root, you are able to then use that to understand the expression. So the essence of Torah is the underlying root of all of existence, which means that all of physical sciences, whether it's psychology, philosophy, mathematics, Maharal will show how Torah is manifest in mathematics, and it's one of those brilliance, like Rav Dessler will go into so many existential aspects and expressions. So it's one of those things where Torah shows you how to live a full life in terms of psychology, in terms of your relationships, in terms of financial success, in terms of self-awareness, in terms of living a fully developed, synergized, holistic life. Torah is the root of all of existence, and the way to live a harmonious, synergistic life is a Torah life, because it shows you the underlying principles of existence. It's one of those things where you'd think that Judaism would be a limited physical religion, right? No. Right? You think Judaism would be a very spiritual religion. You think that it would be fully focused on spirituality, and yet we are a physical religion. Almost all mitzvahs are physical actions. Why? Why, how many spiritual mitzvahs? We talk about this all the time. Believe in Hashem, don't be jealous, don't serve idolatry. How many physical mitzvahs? Right? Those are mind, spiritual, intellectual, philosophical mitzvahs. Almost all mitzvahs are physical. You engage in the physical world. Why? Because Torah is how to live in this world. Torah is how to engage and live a life of oneness in this world. You uplift your physical experience. That's why bris milah, right, when a boy is born, you uplift the physical lever, which could be completely animalistic, and you put some wine in his mouth as well. The idea is that Torah is the gateway into understanding how to live in this world. It is the wisdom of engaging in a life of truth, and the goal of life is not to be happy, but when you are living a life of truth, happiness is the gift you're given, which is a state of realizing you're living with passion and purpose and living the life you were supposed to live. So
your stance, I don't want to put you against a stance, but it really is this, but happiness is basically a byproduct of a sense of purpose, right?
Correct. So it's one of those things where if you ask people, what do you want? Do you want to ask a follow-up question before?
There is a follow-up, but I feel like you're about to answer the question just because you know where I'm going to take this.
Yeah, so if you ask someone, what do you want? So everyone will give you different answers, right? Let's say you say, I want to be wealthy. Why do you want to be wealthy?
Are we answering the question of what is the ultimate purpose of life?
Well, yes.
This is it?
Yes.
All right, because our first episode in the podcast was the purpose of life. And they drove me crazy just telling me what my real purpose is, and I got it. I hope my audience gets it, But at the end of the day, I would love to hear your perspective on it. Given after you made such a book, what do you think is the ultimate purpose of life? And it's going to be hard to tell you in one sentence, but
it's going to be very hard to tell in one sentence.
Watered down way.
There's the metaphysical machshava purpose of creation, which the Ramchal opens up in Mesil Sham and Derech Hashem and goes way, way deeper in Das Tfunos, which is a very, very, very deep discussion that requires like at least a whole shir. Al Regel Achas, in terms of on a personal level, for each individual, we can answer that in a much more succinct way. But in terms of just taking a step back in terms of the purpose of life and happiness, when people say they want what they want in life, it's called the want exercise, the Ratzon exercise. So if you ask people, what do you want in life? And they'll say, like, I want great relationships, I want to be wealthy, I want to be famous, I want to be this, I want to be that. And you say, why do you want that? They say, because I want this. And you say, like, why do you want that? Keep on asking, why do you want what you want? Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you thinking, like, what are you actually doing? Why are you living the life you're living? Like many people, they kind of gave up the process of crafting themselves and saying why they're doing what they're doing. At a certain point in their life, I would say that everybody at some point asks themselves, like, why do I do what I do? But when you re-ask yourself that question and say, like, why do I actually think how I think? Why do I have these relationships? Why do I dress like this? Why do I eat like this? Why do I talk like this? Why have I crafted myself in this way? You start saying, like, why do I really want what I want? Like, what do I want? And then you start thinking, like, I don't know if I've ever asked myself that. Why do I want that? And when you trace it back, the underlying want of what people think they want is they start to realize that they want to be happy. Right? And you say, why do you want to be happy? I don't know, like everyone wants to be happy. Like, why? If you say, why do you want to be wealthy? You might say, because so I can be, get things, so people will respect me, so I can have power, so I can do this. Why do you want to have this? So I can have that. There's always an underlying why for those things. But when people ask, like, why do you want to be happy? There's no real answer, because the underlying desire is to be happy. But the underlying desire is not really to be happy. It's that happiness is the desire Hashem gives you so you can fulfill that desire to be happy. What is the fulfillment of the desire to be happy? Like, how do you become happy? Like, what is happiness? So most people think happiness is joy or happiness is pleasure. But pleasure is fleeting.
And that's a whole separate discussion.
That's a whole separate
happiness
discussion.
And pleasure, yeah.
Happiness is an existential state. It's the state of saying, like, I am who I'm supposed to be. I'm actually living my life the way it could, should, and must be lived. I'm aligned with the true nature of reality. I am becoming the greatest version of myself. I'm living not my truth, but the truth. And I'm in flux, I'm becoming. So happiness is not a state of being, it's a state of becoming. And people think that happiness is a state of being, so they want to be there. They want to be successful, they want to be great, they want to be done with the journey, with the process. But when you realize that happiness is a state of being when you are in a state of becoming, and that it is an existential state, that you never tap into like actual happiness, but it's this conceptual framework of I am in the flux, in the process, in the journey of becoming my ultimate self. That's when you start to actually feel this concept of happiness, and it's a state. But the purpose of life is to go on that journey, is to go on the journey of becoming, so to speak, that which you will never actually be there. It's this endless journey of growth. So intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, physically, financially as well, in terms of expansion and the endless process of becoming.
I think you mentioned one critical idea that can definitely sum up the question, which is happiness is not the goal, it's the journey. The journey is the purpose is the journey. Mm-hmm. Everyone thinks the purpose is to be happy, but you're saying that the journey of attaining happiness, of attaining your purpose and finding our purpose is the actual purpose itself.
And there are very, very deep sources that, once again, like if you break it down into, we can do like a 3-hour shir that develops it in terms of the actual Makoros, or Ramchal is the best way to do it in Das Tfunos, but that's not really what we're going to be doing now. It's not really possible. But
I did have a follow-up.
It is important also just to realize these aren't like ideas, these are Torah ideas. So you can talk about Torah ideas without actually reading the sources, but it's always important to realize the difference between talking about ideas and talking about Torah ideas, because these are sourced in real Makoros as opposed to just philosophical concepts.
The Ramchal definitely hashes out the purpose of life, and Baruch Hashem, I've read it. I've had my rabbi read it to me and tell me to my face that at the end of the day you deserve nothing in this life. I've had my fair share of discipline on that, but the question I really have is if the purpose is the journey, what happens once we attain once we realize our purpose, once we unlock that true self of ours? Is our purpose now fulfilled and we can now part ways with our bodies and go up to heaven? Or
so that's a fantastic question. So the simple answer, and this might blow your mind, the simple answer is that the journey never ends. And I mean never, because many people frame it, first of all, let's open up Olam Haba for a second. So most people think Olam Haba is for your soul, for your spiritual self, for someone else. And you do mitzvahs, you learn Torah, you're a good Eved Hashem, and you get Olam Haba, but like, come on, like I'm not going to go Olam Haba, like my soul's going to go Olam Haba. So once again, the Ramban, Maharal, the Ramchal, they all say that Olam Haba is experiencing you, and that you are a soul. You don't have a soul, you are a soul. You're a self, a consciousness, an inner being, and you're literally building your inner world, and the becoming is the becoming of you, and that's why Shabbos is mean Olam Haba, because Shabbos is an experience of who you've become. You stop malacha, you stop creative activity, and you get to taste who you are, you get to experience who you are. But the way that they actually develop Sadiyah further is that this world is a stage of building and becoming. But by the very definition of what and who we are as human beings, Malachim are perfect. They don't grow, they don't choose, they don't decide, they don't change, they are. And it's called like Shleimus, they're perfect. We are in the realm of what's referred to as Hishtalmus, we are becoming perfect. But the becoming, in terms of if the becoming, let's say you're on a trajectory and you're trying to become perfect, but perfect is this infinite spectrum in terms of where you are. If you're a finite amount of points, an infinite amount of finite points, you'll never get to the end. When you start to learn that the ultimate process and purpose of life is the process of life, and that as opposed to waiting till one day I'm there, you truly, truly learn that what it means to be human is to learn to love becoming, growing, expanding, giving up who you are for who you could become, actually becoming a greater version of yourself on a daily basis, giving up the comfort of where you are for the greatness that resides in the future of where you should go, that never ends. And we think of Olam Haba as the end point. It's actually only another stage. And the way that they talk about Olam Haba is that's the next stage of growth, different, built on what you accomplished in this world. And it's a never-ending flux and process, because it's one of those things where we think that what we want is for the journey to end and for us to arrive there. But once you arrive at any endpoint, for example, like think of any small goal you've ever attained. The moment you attain it, you're like, okay, great, like how long does that last? A day, 2 days, a week, and then you want something more. And you think of that as a problem, like I'm never satisfied. No, that's only a problem when you don't have gratitude. When you have gratitude for what you've accomplished, and you also realize that what it means to be alive in this world is to want to strive and accomplish and become more, you start to harness that. And it's the recognition that you don't ever actually want to be at the destination, because then, like, what would you do then? You want to spend it, like, imagine spending a year doing nothing. Now imagine spending 2 years doing nothing. Imagine spending eternity doing nothing. No, you want to spend eternity experiencing the best aspect of what it means to be. What's the best aspect of what it means to be? To become, learn new things, new experiences, new connections, new understandings. That's why the Gemara says that in Olam Haba, the tzaddikim will circle around the Kadosh Baruch Hu pointing. Why? Because what's a circle? Circle never ends. There's no starting point, no end point. Why are they pointing at Hashem? Because the way the Baalei Machshava talk about it is that they are getting endlessly new insights and connections and deeper understanding and perceptions of Torah, of Hashem, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of life, of themselves. And it's a never-ending process. And what happens when a circle keeps on going around? You can say there's no progress. But that's only when you're looking at it from a certain perspective. A circle going around and around can also build a spiral. And that's what true humanity is. It's a never-ending process of growth. And the true purpose of life is to fall in love with growth, to fall in love with learning, to fall in love with life, with Hashem, with Torah, and to realize that you're not repeating. That's why Chazara, why is 101 times better than 100? Because each time you learn something, you're learning it, you're relearning it. You're not relearning it, you're learning it anew. It's always deepening, always something new, always a new aspect. That's why you bring Chiddush into every aspect of life. It's expansion. It's further development. It's not saying I'm rejecting what happened before, what came before. It's building on it. That's the spiral concept. Like you're just elevating based on what was coming. And I would say a lot of people, the reason they don't love to learn is because they want to be there. They want to know everything. They don't want to go through the process of struggle. But when you learn to fall in love with the process, it's one of those things where I'll share just a very quick story. there was a man who wanted to climb a mountain. And he was climbing, and about a day in, a helicopter saw that he was climbing, came over and said, "Where are you going?" And he said, I'm going up this mountain. And the guy in the helicopter said, "Oh, I'm actually going there too. Do you want to come in the helicopter? I'll take you there." And the guy smiled and says, "You don't understand. I don't want to be on top. I want to climb. I want to climb." And so many people, they want to have great relationships. They want to love Hashem. They want to love Torah. They want to love themselves. They want to be in great physical shape. They want all these things, but they don't want to go through the rigorous daily work ethic and actually build it. They just want it. And because they just want to be there but don't want to get there, they don't do it. And not that they don't do it, they usually will try to do it and give up because it's just so painful and uncomfortable and unenjoyable. But it's one of those things where a lot of people, they love the gym. Even though it's painful, even though it's difficult, they love the gym because they enjoy the fact that they're building muscle, that they're getting healthier, and they see it. And a lot of people, the reason they don't enjoy spiritual growth is because it's very hard to quantify it and say, I actually see the growth. And because they don't learn how to recognize the growth, they don't enjoy it, and because they don't enjoy it, they give up. So one is learning how to just enjoy learning, enjoy growing, enjoy getting out of your comfort zone, enjoy getting uncomfortable with having the paradigm. That's literally why I'm in this world. Number two is the skill set of actually recognizing progress. And I like to give like the Shana Aleph, Shana Bet Mashal. For people who go to yeshiva for a year in Israel, the first year, for let's say, people grew up in certain circles, you go to Israel for a year or two. When you go for the first year, it's like amazing because a lot of people in high school, they aren't working on themselves as much as they should be. And you go to Israel, and all of a sudden you fall in love with certain things. You say, okay, I'm going to start learning Torah. It's like, wow, I went from not learning Torah to learning Torah. Like, it's incredible. And then you say, okay, I'm going to start not speaking Lashon Hara, all the time. It's amazing. And then you say, I'm going to start with the first level of Shmir Sinayim, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm literally like a tzaddik, and my life's changing, and I'm growing, and I'm literally spiritually striving, and it's incredible. And then Shana Bet, a lot of people burn out because it goes from, improving Shmir Sinayim, improving how much you learn Torah, what type of Torah you learn, the quality of Torah learning, how is it changing you, are you remembering it? And it's one of those things where recognizing spiritual growth is the most difficult thing because you can't always see it unless you learn how. And the mashal I always give is building a sculpture. That you say, I want to sculpt a human being. So, I start off by saying, okay, here's the head. I'm going to take off a giant slab and take off a giant slab. And it's like, whoa, look at this giant slab I just took off. It's so easy to see that you're doing something. But then once you have the basic structure of the head, to fine-tune it, to chisel it, to perfect it, like a tiny little thing here, a tiny little thing there, you can easily start saying, am I actually doing anything? Is it getting better? Am I making any progress? But when you start to realize that growth has stages, and that each stage is extraordinary and unique in its own, but it's remarkable to realize how remarkable small progress is. And that's life, meaning a life of 80 years of growth is when you appreciate and recognize the small things. A life of a year of growth and then 80 years of stagnation is when you say, what's the point? I'm not changing, I'm not transforming my life. So once you learn how to enjoy the process and realize that it's it's as the saying goes, it's a marathon. You got to pace yourself. You got to go long term. This is a life, not a day. You're trying to figure out how you can spend the rest of your life growing. When you enjoy the process and you recognize the small things, everything changes.
Beautiful. Like before, it was an action-packed answer. So rather than commenting and bringing out more from whatever you said, I think to add is to reduce in this case. But I do want to ask you just to this. Let me backtrack. On every chapter that you identified in every parsha, at the end you do a summary verse and as well as an exercise as well, a practical application. So speaking about all these amazing ideas, what's a takeaway, a practical exercise that you can give to myself and everyone who's watching this, who's sitting here today, about utilizing these ideas and actually bringing it to life in our day-to-day? That's
a great question. I think that's ultimately what life becomes about, because you don't want to learn ideas, you want to live ideas. And you don't want to learn Torah, you want to live Torah. And I often talk about this, how it's very easy to view Torah as an academic pursuit, where you learn halacha, you listen to a shiur, you're mekayim mitzvot Talmud Torah, and you go back to your life. It's a morning seder, it's a night seder, it's a chavrusa, it's while you're cooking, it's while you're eating, it's while you're walking, while you're exercising, whatever it is, and it doesn't permeate your life. And you don't think of Torah as transformative. But once you realize that Torah is meant to transform the way you live your life, you ask yourself that question. Like, how do I live Torah? And it ultimately comes down to a few very simple ideas. Number one is self-awareness, which is whatever you're learning, you basically say, how does this affect, number one, the way I see the world, number two, the way I live my life? What can I do to affect how I live my life? So let's say you learn about Hakar Satov. So one way to learn about Hakar Satov is an intellectual endeavor. The other way is you say, okay, how do I show gratitude to my family, to my spouse, to my friends, to Hashem, to myself? And then it's about implementing practical tools into your day. So one of the things I often tell in my coaching practice to my clients is to have 3 daily primers every single morning, right? 3 big goals for the rest of your life. So that ultimately basically frames you of what am I living my life for, what am I heading towards? And 3 small goals, like what am I going to do today to head me towards that direction? Meaning, what am I practically going to do today that's going to get me closer to my ultimate goals in life? And then what are the 3 things I'm most grateful for? Which basically brings in all the great things that have happened to me in the past. And what it does is basically you have the future, 3 giant goals for the rest of my life, the past, 3 things I'm grateful for, and 3 goals for today, the present. Past, future, present, converging into one. And you start your day like that. It's amazing. Now, whenever you learn things, building that into just the way you prime yourself in the morning, or having notes, having reminders, bringing the Torah into your life so that you can live it, it's a personal journey, as in no one knows who you are except for you, and you don't even know who you are yet. You're still discovering who you are. That's really the journey of life. Kadosh Baruch Hu knows who you are, knows who you could be and should be, and you're basically on that journey towards it. But it's one of those things where you say, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what have I tried, what haven't I tried? And it's about thinking of yourself as the ultimate experiment in life, and you're just spending your life figuring out who you are, what you could be, what works, what doesn't work. It's like everyone learns differently. Everyone thinks differently. Some people like learning by reading. Some people like learning by listening. Some people like learning by watching. It's one of those things where everyone's different. So you have to know you, and no one can give you those answers. The practical way of doing it is implementing it in your life in practical, strategic ways. But in terms of what works best for you, only you're going to find that out. And that's why you have a Rebbe. A Rebbe is not designed to tell you what to do. He's designed to help you figure it out who you are. That's Aseh Lecha Rav. A great Rebbe is not someone who tells you what to do in terms of self-awareness, but helps you figure out who you are. And when it comes to living Torah, it's truly a journey of self-awareness. And self-awareness comes from trial and error. It comes from sitting in a room by yourself and trying to think and really become aware of who you are. Why do you do what you do? How did you get to where you are? What has worked, what hasn't worked? What do you need to work on? What don't you need to work on? I mean, we need to work on everything, but to different degrees. And that's the greatest way to live Torah, is to try to live Torah.
Beautiful. Really, it's a pleasure to sit down with you once again. I would implore on everybody to go ahead and purchase the book, The Journey to Your Ultimate Self. Where can it be found right now, online? So right now it can be found on my website, shmuelreichman.com. Okay. And it's description below. Yeah, I don't know when people are going to end up watching this. It's almost sold out. So it's available in basically bookstores all over the world. It is available on Amazon. It almost sold out on Amazon, so depending on when you watch this, I think right now there's only 4 copies left. Got to restock. So we are actually in the middle of a reprint because it sold out so quickly. But I look forward to taking this journey with you, and I wish everyone tremendous hatzlacha. Oh, wait. Just one last question just before we go. I couldn't leave without ending off with a question like this. It's very simple, of course, but I'll let you decide, or you can take a few-minute breather. What would be one piece of advice you can give? I would like to direct this answer towards young professionals and teens alike, but to all people around the world. What would be one piece of advice you can give? It could be related from your book, it can be in general. The people are listening to you, including myself.
I often get asked this question at the end of interviews, and I don't change my answer because it is the single principle that changed my life. And it's really 2 words. It's possible. It's possible. And the reason those 2 words changed my life is because when I was younger, I was pre-med when I started college, and I was going to take a very safe path in life. And then my life fell apart, and we're not going to go into the whole story right now, but I became inspired to really strive for greatness, to strive for extraordinary, to try to live my dream and try to inspire Klal Yisrael, and there was no real path to do it. And very similar to Avraham, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Avram Lech Lecha, doesn't tell him where he's going to. Lech Lecha means go, on this cover of the Sefer it means go, but it also means go to yourself. And what's the journey to your ultimate self? You don't know where you're going. You're journeying, and you have to leave the comfort of where you are to where you want to go, but you don't know if you're going to succeed. You don't know how you're going to do it. You don't know the path. It's like, for example, the Baal Machshava say that Ani is the self and Aniya is a ship, because we're all like ships at sea. On dry land, there's a path. You just follow the path. On the sea, there's no path. You can't basically follow someone else's path in life. You have to figure out who you are. You have to take the vulnerable journey into the unknown. And it's one of those things where anyone who is inspired to strive for more life, the voice goes off in the back of your head that says, who do you think you are? You can't do it. You're going to fail. What will people think of you? What if you fail? What if you succeed? It's not as good as you thought it would be. All the sacrifices you're going to have to make. Are you really ready for this? And also, when have you ever done anything great in your life until now? And there's all these challenges and self-doubts, and you ask yourself, can I really do this? And at that point in my life where I was at that turning point, someone once, because it was in a shir, and they basically just shared those 2 words, that it's possible. And I was thinking that, am I going to succeed? I don't know. If you go out of your comfort zone, if you say, I want more, I want to become a Talmid Chacham, I want to have a great marriage, I want to achieve success as an entrepreneur, I want to become more self-aware, I want to become a better person, I want to get in better shape, I want to start living my ultimate life. The first thing that you have to ask yourself is, can you really do it? And you know what? Maybe you won't be able to do it. Maybe you'll fail. It's possible. But it's also possible you'll succeed. And when you start to realize that you can raise your standards, that you can live a greater life, that it's possible. Once it's possible, everything changes. Because once it's possible, oh my gosh, if it's possible for me to live the most extraordinary life, why wouldn't I try? Of course it's possible that you're not going to succeed. And you don't know what's going to happen, but by striving, by going in that direction, you start on the most incredible journey, and there's no going back. Anyone who has ever started on the journey to try to really become something with themselves knows that it's just, so many people are just living such a normal, ordinary life because they're scared, they don't feel like they're deserving, they don't feel like they're destined for more, and they just accepted so many ridiculously low standards in their life because they don't think that they are deserving, or even it's even possible for them to have more. But once you realize that it's not only possible, that you're not only deserving, but that literally you're destined for this, and that you were shown your unique purpose in the womb, and it literally is taken away. It wasn't taken away, you lost access. That's why the Vilna Gaon says that very often you'll hear deep ideas, and you won't feel like you're learning them, you'll almost feel like you recognize them, like they just click. Because you're not learning them anew, you're rediscovering things that are already deep within you, because you learned it all in the womb. And then when you realize that the reason we're in this world is to strive, is to grow, is to become, is to contribute, is to live with the highest standards, and that we are all built B'Tselem Elokim, we are all designed for greatness. But greatness is becoming you, not becoming better than that person, better than him, better than her. It's not becoming the most intelligent, the most brilliant, the best looking, the richest, the most popular. It's about becoming who you are designed to become, becoming who you're destined to become, and that just comes with self-awareness and endless effort. Life you can't go back. Once you start on that journey, you can't go back, but it all starts with 2 simple words. It's possible. And so my bracha to everyone, getting back to the hatzlacha, wishing you all tremendous hatzlacha on the journey to ultimate selves. Trust me, we're all on this journey. I am, David is, and
I have a long way to go.
We all have a long way to go. There is no end, but it's learning to enjoy the journey, enjoy the process, and recognizing that not only is it possible, once you realize it's possible, it's necessary.
Rabbi, thank you so much for coming out to Brooklyn and really showing us how it's done. I appreciate it, giving us a sneak peek into the book. Once again, I want to let everyone know to please purchase this book. It can be found in the description below, as well as many lectures by the rabbi as well in the past. And once again, thank you so much for coming. All
Pleasure is all mine, David, as always.
Thank you. Okay, amazing, Rabbi.
Yeah.
See, off the cuff is not all that bad.
No, off the cuff is the best.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where off the cuff requires like tremendous comfort.
Yeah.
And comfort
We never met
comes-
before.
Yeah.